It's the weekly show with David J. Maloney. This week, David talks to comedian and podcaster Shuli Egar. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome to everyone at home, and I would normally say our studio audience to the weekly show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. I say normally because we'd usually shoot the show before a small studio audience at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, but we are still shooting from home due to renewed coronavirus concerns. We do hope to gain clearance to get back to our live-to-tape shows real soon. So, Kanye West has recently admitted he punched out an autograph seeker who was allegedly egging him on outside a West Hollywood club. Coincidentally, this is Kanye's biggest hit in the last 5 years. And actress Lisa Bonet and Aquaman star Jason Momoa have split up. This comes after an ugly public spat in which he was heard shouting at the top of his gills. In an interview with the New York Times, SNL performer Bowen Yang spoke out about the increased pressure of being both gay and Asian, as well as his personal experiences with conversion therapy. For example, Bowen got an A+ in his therapy, but his Chinese parents still weren't satisfied with his progress. Fuel prices remain high despite President Biden's release of some of our oil reserves. But the other day, I was really excited when I was able to fill my tank for just $46. Even better, it gave me just enough gas to finish both my front and back lawns. Oh, and did you hear about this? Facebook is now pushing to get more people in developing countries on the internet and onto Facebook. I just can't wait to see all the posts of what people aren't eating. Speaking of the internet, who else put much more time and effort into naming their first Wi-Fi than their first child? I mean, I know it can't just be me. And in Scotland, a Tibetan-themed cafe on the brink of bankruptcy was saved by fundraising promoted in part by the Dalai Lama himself. The owner said the coffee shop was in fact inspired by the Dalai Lama. And apparently, the baristas make a perfect cortado because they've had 5 to 6 lifetimes to practice. And lastly, speaking of coffee shops, I usually use the drive-thru at Starbucks, but actually went inside the other day and saw Starbucks also now sells Greek yogurt. I'm not sure how long this has been a thing, but to answer your question, yes, they still only have one bathroom. On tonight's show, we've got the second part of our interview with a hilarious comedian who spent 15 years on The Howard Stern Show. He's now got his own wonderful podcast, The Shuli Show, and will be right here on the Gulf Coast doing stand-up at the end of this month. We have Shuli Egar on the show with us tonight, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. So I'd like for our audience to hear your origin story with the Howard Stern Show. I think it has something to do with a nagging girlfriend, maybe a joke and a fateful call. What's the story there?
Yeah, so I was living in Vegas. I had listened to the Stern Show for years before that. One of the things I really loved were the fights that they used to get into, and I would work late, so I'd get off work at about 1 o'clock. The show would come on live at 3 a.m. In Vegas, and I would usually stay up playing video games, getting stoned, and listening to 3 hours of Stern, and then I'd go to bed. It's Vegas, you know. Everybody's up all night, yeah. and weed is the least of your drug worries in Vegas, believe me. So I listen, and then all of a sudden I hear, oh, and when I would listen, you know, my girlfriend at the time, my ex, she would get mad that I would be listening to this show instead of coming to bed. And it was much more fun to play video games and listen to the show than it was to come to bed. So I remember this one night we got in a big argument. She's just like, I don't get it. She's like, you listen to the show, you record stuff from the show. She's like, you know, call in, do something. And I'm just like, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about, you know. And she goes to bed. And that night, that morning, he announces that the show is coming to the Hard Rock Hotel in Vegas, and that they're going to do the show live from a blackjack table. And if you want to make a bet at the table, you should come down to the Hard Rock and we'll figure out how to get you on and make bets. And I said, all right, I'm going to call. And I picked up the phone and I called the 800 number for the first time after listening for like 8-9 years. And it picks up. And the screener says, "What do you want to talk to Howard about?" And I said, I wanna tell him a joke. And if he laughs, I want to be able to make a bet with him at the blackjack table. And he says, "All right, hold on." And next thing you know, I get on the air like fate, like destiny. I just hear him, "Shuli, you're on the air." And I'm like, "Hey, I want to tell you a joke. And if you laugh, I want to make a bet with you at the table." And he kind of starts, he's like, "I don't know, I don't know." And I'm like, "Come on, Howard, please." He says, "All right, go ahead." So I said, this guy goes to a golf course. And he says, "I want to play 18 holes and I want a caddy." And he stops and he goes, "Jackie, you know this joke?" And I'm like, Jackie, don't ruin it." Jackie, the joke man, was on the show at the time and he know every joke. And I started again. Said, the guy says, "I want to play 18 holes and I want a caddy." And the golf guy says, the owner of the course says, "Listen, I got these robot caddies. I want you to try one out on me, 9 holes. Tell me what you think." Says, "I just got 5 of these." Says, "All right." He goes out. This robot starts giving him club speed, wind speed, which club to use, wind speed, all this stuff. The guy ends up shooting the best 9 holes of golf he's ever shot. Comes back to the owner. He says, "You got 5 of these?" He says, "Get 50. You're going to be rich. This is amazing." So he comes back to the golf course 3 weeks later, brings a buddy with him. He says, "We want to play 18 holes and we want a robot caddy." And the golf club owner says, "Sorry, I had to get rid of the robots." And he says, What happened? They were great." He says, "Well, it turns out when the sun would hit it, the gray metal frame, it would reflect and blind the golfer's vision." And the guy says, paint him black." He says, "We did. 2 called in sick, 3 tried to rob us." And Howard chuckled. And then he goes, "Oh, that's so stupid." And I'm like, "You laughed." And he's like, "All right, hold on. I'll put you on with Gary." And that was it. It was literally my first call to the show. I got on the air and I got booked to come and make a bet with them at the blackjack table, which I ended up doing. I brought every penny to my name at the time, which was $300, and we played one hand on the table of blackjack, and sure enough, we got an 11, and everybody wanted to double down, but over here was working at a liquor store. I didn't have another $300, so Howard staked me another 300. We hit the double down. We won. Dealer busted. And after that, I saw that show as like a job. Even before I started working for him, I said, "I'm going to come up with material, whatever I can come up with, and I'm going to call in every day. And maybe one day I'll get a shot with these guys. Maybe one day I'll be able to do some sort of work with them, So that was my story.
Wow. How did you initially find out they wanted you on the show full time?
They called me, a guy by the name of Tim Sabian, who was Howard's first program director at Sirius, gives me a call one day. I'm in Vegas. I'm doing an internet radio show with 2 other comics. And he calls me and he says, "This is Tim Sabian. I'm working on something. I can't even discuss it on the phone with you. But, and this was a Saturday. He says, I need you out in New York by tomorrow." And I'm like, I go, "All right, what is this for?" He goes, "Can't talk about it, but you got to come out here. We'll put you up in a hotel. Come to Syria." I said, "Oh, okay." I go to my dad. I don't have a pot. I'm running 4 open mics. I'm making like $80 a week. Uh, you know, I go to my dad. I said, "You got to buy me a plane ticket to New York." And my dad, he's an Israeli. He ain't giving up that kind of money without some questions, right? So he's like, "For what?" And I'm like, "It's for a job with the Stern Show." "If it's a job, why don't they pay for the ticket?" I said, "Listen, I don't know. It's like a tryout." "Well, what are you trying out for?" "I don't know. He won't tell me over the phone." "So you want me to buy you?" I go, "Jesus Christ, can you just buy me a ticket?" Till this day, he knows the exact amount. If you ask my dad, how much was the plane ticket for
Yeah.
Shuli to go to New York? And $948. He remembers till this day. So yeah, he bought me a ticket. I flew out the next day. Monday shows up. They bring me into this boardroom. and it's this news team. Howard decided he wants a Howard 100 news team to cover the world of the Stern Show, the guests, the staff, the Whack Pack, you name it. We were like the Entertainment Tonight for Howard's show, right? And the only problem is they hired all these great real reporters, but none of them knew the show. None of them were super fans of the show. So Tim brought me in to be a consultant and to kind of teach them about the show. And I did. That was my first full day. I taught them. So I snuck a recorder out and I went out to Times Square and I started asking people, are you excited that Howard's coming to Sirius? Because Howard wasn't there yet. Howard was still on terrestrial radio.
Yeah.
So I'm asking people, are you excited that Howard's coming? And they would say whatever they'd said, I would just reply with something. I was doing crowd work. I was being a comic, but I was using Howard's name. And I brought it back to the news director at the time. And she was like, this is fantastic. I'm putting this on the air right now. And for me, I was like, all right, time to learn how to edit, time to learn how to interview, time to learn anything and everything. You shine shoes, whatever they're going to keep me here for. I am not going back to that Israeli couple in that townhouse. And yeah, and so I lasted, man, a full year. And then I finally got a contract with Sirius. I made the cut from 18 reporters to 4, and I was one of the 4. So
there's got to be so many stories that could be told from your time with the show. Is there one that stands out to you? I mean, the Whack Pack, the puppets. I mean, what was your favorite shtick?
I mean, as a huge fan of the show throughout the years, hearing the great Billy West do impressions and work puppets on there, to be able to do a sliver of that, you know, I in no way came close to the genius that he did, but to be able to do stuff like that, just to be able to be in the room and make them laugh, like with my like to look over and see Howard laughing as hard as humanly possible, is everything. It's the reason. It's, you know, the dream I had from my first call into the show was to be hanging and making that guy laugh. So, you know, I came here from Israel. I didn't know the language that great. I had long hair. I looked weird. I had a weird name. So my only kind of coping mechanism and kind of getting people to not treat me right, like that was my tool that I kind of used to become the tool that I am today.
The tool you used to become the tool you are today. You spent, like you said, a good 15 years on the Howard Stern show, but then the pandemic hits. It hits New York City extremely hard.
Yeah.
In early mid 2020, and then we talked about it. You moved to Alabama, which is where, you know, as you know, we're currently recording this show. And then you started your own fantastic podcast, The Shuli Show. Was it always a dream of yours to kind of have your own comedy show? Or was that something that developed during the course of time, maybe with Howard Stern? Or did you just see this as an opportunity when you had to, you know, take the break from New York City?
Well, you know, I think a couple things. One, I always felt like I wanted to try and do something like, you know, a podcast. I see a lot of my comedian friends are doing it. It's a great way to work out material without having to go out on stage. And it's a great way to build a fan base. You know, when I started, the way you sold tickets was you put flyers on cars, and we had this awful, you know, 1,000 flyers equals 10 tickets sold, maybe. Right. You know what a pain in the ass it is to put 1,000 flyers on cars. So now with podcasts, the cars are coming to you, right? Like you don't have to guess. You don't have to guess. I hope this guy shows up or that guy. If they found your show, if they subscribe, if they donated to your Patreon, whatever, if you're coming to their town, they're coming to see you. So it's a great way to build the fan base. Plus, you know, if I make this move 7, 8 years ago, 6, 5 years ago, maybe, I think my only natural move is to find another gig in radio. Whereas now, you know, the the field is wide open, right? Like everybody, yeah, and it's saturated with a lot of, but it's also that all depends on what you're bringing to the table. If you want to kind of not stand out from everything else that's out there, you're not gonna. But if you come with something, original and be yourself. And I learned from, not only Howard, but three of the greats. I worked for Howard. I did a lot of stuff with Jay Thomas. I was his comedic sidekick for
Wow.
many years. And then Scott Farrell, the sports guy. I spent a lot of time on his airwaves.
I remember listening to Jay way, way, way back when I lived in upstate New York because the signal would reach up. I think it was WPLJ.
Yeah. 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 I remember listening to him when my dad, before Howard came to LA, I would listen to Jay on Power 106 FM in LA. And I remember his billboards. And I mean, think about that. Howard, Jay, Dice, Howie Mandel, all those four alone are guys that I watched as a kid going, wow, like I would love to be, you know, I was at a thing Don Rickles was doing. Rickles is another guy I kind of met face to face when I was a kid. He was filming a bit for a special he did called Buy This Tape, You Hockey Puck. And and he was at Universal Studios in a sandwich board sign, and it said insults $1. And there was a line around the damn corner of people with dollars in their hands. And he would hand him the dollar. He'd go, "Thank you, sweetheart. The bus for the home's picking you up right over here. Get over here." And just screaming at everybody. So like all these things that I feel like if you're truly passionate about these things in life and you truly believe in yourself and you do the work, like you can accomplish. And I'm not a dreams can come true guy, believe me, but I've lived so many already, man. It's wild.
So you get your first show recorded and out into the world. What were the thoughts going through your head as you waited to see what the response would be?
The first show I wasn't worried about. The first show was I was worried about show 2 and 3 and 4. I knew everybody was going to show up for show 1 because I had left the show. The
Mhm.
show was not going to talk about it. That's just how Howard operates, and that's fine. But people will want to know. So for me, it's like, yeah, episode 1, they're all going to tune in. It's going to be the best numbers, for a while. How do you keep them for till episode 10, till episode 20, right?
Mhm.
So that's what I was concerned about, is where do we go after we tell the story? What do we do? What are my strengths? What can I lean into? What should I stay away from? I've done, in comedy, when you work with somebody, let's say a headliner takes you on the road with them, right? And you're touring with this headliner for a couple months. Whether you know it or not, and it's a subconscious thing for the most part, your cadence starts to mirror that comic, right? So another thing for me was like, I've been on this tour for 15 years. I also have to be careful of not doing the same stuff I did on for this. It's like I had to kind of relearn broadcasting, and this time I'm on my own. I'm not chiming in with stuff and somebody else is steering the ship. And yeah, it was a lot easier, but I wanted more. I wanted more of a responsibility. I wanted to grow more on air and take more chances and open up more.
It seems like the response has been fantastic. And what has it meant, for you to see an audience responding this way to your very own show?
It's great, man. I really, I believe in me. That's why I took this chance. But you never know how it's going to be received, and the response and still continues. I mean, I think we're close. I think we're over 80 episodes. We're gearing up close to 100 episodes. I think we're almost at 1 million download. We're doing just under 100,000 downloads a month, which is, again, 80 plus episodes. There's people that have been doing podcasts for 10 years that don't get on the charts, don't have those kind of numbers, don't get sponsors. So for me, like, the fact that it's working is great. And it just puts a ton of wind in my sails to keep it going. How do we take it to the next level? What's, coming up? Doing this podcast with my buddy James, this comedian podcast about bombing. We do another podcast, me and a few other comics, called The Miserable Men Show, where I tell people it's like The View if The View was cavemen, Neanderthal joke-telling cavemen. It's myself, the Reverend Bob Levy, who you may know from Stern days of the past. Another comedian, Mike Morse, who is a roast writer, wrote a lot of roast jokes for Comedy Central roasts and Lampanelli. And another guy, Mark Burns, who works with animal regulation. And we goof on him nonstop because of that.
Did you kind of know that this was the plan? I remember there was, you called it, I don't know if you called in or they were chatting with you, but Jimmy Kimmel was there, Robin was there, Howard was there, and they were pressing you. They were pressing you on the move to Alabama and busting your chops and saying, well, what are you going to do when we all come back? What are you going to do when we all come back? Did you already know that this was kind of something you were thinking in the back of your head, maybe? That maybe I'm just going to stay down here and do this and maybe I'm never coming back?
I knew in March when they sent us home from work and said, go home and don't come back till we tell you. I told my wife, I'll never forget, I put my work badge on the counter. I put my Metro card on the counter. I said, we are never, and I looked at her, I said, we are never going back into that studio ever again. She said, what do you mean? I said, this guy, Howard, is a germaphobe on a good day. There's a frigging pandemic going on. We're never going to see him again. We're never going to be in that studio again. And I knew that. So that's why we started, when people started trying to break into our apartment building, that's when I'm like, okay, it's time to move. So I checked with management. I asked numerous times, does it matter where home is since we're working from home? No, not at all.
So can you share at all what you've got planned for the Shuli Show this year?
Oh my God, we have a ton planned. We got some great guests in store this year. We just had a great episode with Lisa Lampanelli, Jim Florentine. We're supposed to be having Sebastian Maniscalco is going to come on, Artie Lang, Tom Segura and his wife. Plus I have an former FBI expert who does stand-up comedy now, Vincent D'Agostino.
So and now you're also still headlining across the country, and you're going to be here in Mobile, Alabama at the Alabama Music Box towards the end of this month. What can we expect from you when we see you there?
I've never been to Mobile, so you can expect me to keep the car running. No, seriously. I'm looking to have a great time. I love the people of the South. I say this from the bottom of my heart. You guys still beat your kids, and God bless you for it, because you're raising a good crop. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I see them working out there, and that's because they don't want to get hit. Good for you. Come out, have some fun. Mobile, Alabama, doing Lafayette as well, doing Tampa side splitters. You can go to shalomshuli.com for any tickets, and you can go on Twitter, Instagram. Shalom Shuli is the same thing. And shalom is a Hebrew word. It means hello, goodbye, peace, and get them. All right. So there you go.
Shuli, thank you so much for being on the show and for all the laughs. Ladies and gentlemen, Shuli Egar.
And I hope you come to the show.
That's our show for tonight. A special thanks to Shuli Egar for joining us again. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, everyone.